Hi, I'm Dr. Mitch Medina, and this is the life of Christ. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, many unusual things happened. We spoke about some of them in our last session. We're in Section 12, page 13 of our textbook, The Life of Christ in Stereo, or you can follow it in your Bible at Matthew chapter 2, verse 7. Wise men came from the east looking for the king of the Jews. Now remember, Herod the so-called Great was the king of the Jews, although he wasn't really a Jew. He was an Edomite, a descendant of Esau. And when Herod heard that somebody was looking for the king of the Jews, he was pretty concerned because he knew that he himself was not of the royal line of David, and so that he could easily be displaced. So he asked all of those who were learned in the Old Testament prophets where the Messiah was to be born, since the Messiah was supposed to be from the house and kingdom of David, according to the house of King David, according to the Old Testament prophets. So the scribes and the Pharisees and the experts in the law quoted to King Herod from Micah chapter 5 and verse 2, "And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means the least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you shall come forth a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." God went to a lot of trouble to ensure that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem instead of in Nazareth, which is close to the Sea of Galilee, where his mother Mary and his stepfather Joseph lived. Then Herod, having heard about this news of wise men coming from the east, secretly sent for them and asked them carefully what time the star had appeared. Now, Jerusalem isn't really very big. If you go to the city of Jerusalem today, the entire municipality of Jerusalem has about 600,000 residents, which I think makes it about the same size as Kisumu. But the municipality of Jerusalem is much larger than the old walled city, which is still there. In the old city itself, there are probably not more than 50,000 residents. And to this day, it seems that everybody in Jerusalem knows everybody in Jerusalem because it's small. It's just sort of an overgrown village. So when these wise men from out of the country showed up and started asking funny questions, the word reached King Herod in his palace pretty quickly. You can still see, excuse me, a remnant of King Herod's palace in Jerusalem. It's misleadingly called the Tower of David, and it's near the Jaffa Gate. The tower there has nothing to do with David at all, and the building itself is a museum of the Jerusalem municipality. Now, so within this small walled area, news travels very quickly. When we were in exile in Jerusalem for a couple of years, we had a store on the Via Dolorosa, or very near to it. The Via Dolorosa is the place where Jesus carried the cross to Mount Calvary. Actually, our store was located in the graveyard of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That's one of the sites where supposedly Jesus was crucified, died, and buried. There are at least 3 different sites that are shown in Jerusalem as the site. I don't like the Holy Sepulchre at all. It's a very dark and unpleasant place, in my opinion. Probably once upon a time it had a graveyard. Anyway, if it had a graveyard, it was in the back of the church. And if it was in the back of the church, then that's where our store was built. So if you can imagine being in the graveyard, and it was a graveyard because nobody ever came to our shop. Well, anyway, I just told that story to set the context for this, that in Jerusalem, as I mentioned, it was a den of thieves in Jesus' day, and it still is now. So every once in a while, the Israelis would try to come and collect taxes from the shops in the old city. Now, nobody wants to pay taxes anywhere, but especially in Jerusalem, the Palestinians don't want to pay taxes because they're under occupation. And legally, they don't have to pay taxes to the occupying power. But Israel says that Jerusalem is Israel, so that they claim the right to pay these taxes. We were in a Palestinian section. It's called, the part of Jerusalem where we were is called the Christian Quarter. But it's not really Christian at all, except that there are a lot of old Christian buildings there. Mostly the people who live in the Christian Quarter are Muslims. There are very few Christians left. Well, anyway, when the Israeli soldiers would show up in the old city to see if the stores were paying their taxes, they could only go to one store, because as soon as they went to one store, somebody was calling from the back room, and every store in the old city closed down. So, including ours. Big iron gate, slam, bang, boom, everybody goes home for the day. So this kind of gives you an idea how news travels in the alleyways of Jerusalem. So when these wise men showed up looking for King Herod, looking for the king of Judah, the king of the Jews, and Herod knew perfectly well that he wasn't the king of the Jews and he hadn't had any children lately, he heard these wise men were in town, and he asked them carefully what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search with care for the young child, and when you have found him, bring word back to me, that I too may come and pay him homage." Sly fox. He, of course, had no intention of giving anybody other than, having anybody other than himself receive homage as the king of Judah, the king of the Jews. Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea. On the 8th day, his parents traveled a short distance to Jerusalem so that he could be circumcised and Mary could be cleansed of the blood of her childbirth. Apparently then they went back to Bethlehem, not directly to Nazareth. Mary was recovering from childbirth. The infant Jesus was very young. So when the wise men had heard the king, they departed. And lo, the star which they had seen in the east went before them until it came and stood over where the young child was. Now, what was this star? In the book of Revelation, angels are repeatedly represented by stars. In Revelation 1:20, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches. So I think it's best to interpret this star as being a manifestation of an angelic messenger. Some have tried to make it out that this was a star in the night sky, that there was an unusual conjunction of planets about the time that Jesus was born, and that the wise men were astrologers. But this astronomical and astrological explanation doesn't account for the fact that the star moved and stood over the place where the young child was born. Planets don't do that. They stay where they are in the sky. They rise and fall, apparently to man, as the earth turns, but they don't go and stand over a given town. So the star, to my eyes at least, and I think in the Spirit of God, is clearly an angel. So that shining manifestation of a heavenly spirit came and stood over where the young child was. When the wise men saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. Then, on entering the house, apparently Joseph had managed to make arrangements to get out of the stable in the inn and get into a house, probably his own house, the one that he owned, that he went up to Bethlehem to get registered for the purpose of paying property taxes. What a joy. Then on entering the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. And opening their treasures, they presented to him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. It's from the presentation of gifts by the wise men that we derive our tradition of giving gifts on Christmas. Each of these gifts is symbolic. Gold symbolizes royalty. Frankincense is a fragrant kind of incense. It symbolizes prayer. In the book of Revelation, again, we can see how an angel before the heavenly temple mixed the frankincense before the altar of heaven with the prayers of the saints. That angel is almost certainly Jesus, because no one else is qualified to add or mix or refine anything with the prayers of the saints. The last gift, myrrh, is very interesting because it smells good. It's an antiseptic. It's an ancient medicine, but it tastes terrible. It's really bitter. It comes from the sap of a tree, a gum, and it's an effective antiseptic. You can also take myrrh tea for stomach remedies. It'll fix your stomach remedies all right, but it tastes terrible. It's very bitter. So this gift of myrrh symbolizes the bitterness of the death of the cross. As Simeon had said to Mary in his prophecy, which we recalled in Luke just a couple of days ago, a sword will go through your own soul also. From the beginning, the glad tidings of great joy, which shall be and are to all people, were tempered with a prophecy of the bitterness of the cross. For us who are walking in the life of Christ, for that life that was in him is in us, and the light was and is the light of men. Let us, in the words of Hebrews 12:2, look unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. No matter how well things may go for you for a time, just as things went well for Jesus in public ministry for a time, there will also come a time when the cross is going to make its appearance in your life. Yet for the joy that is set before us, living in the light of eternity, we endure the cross, despising the shame, and in the end, in eternity, we will sit down with Jesus at the right hand of the throne of God. So, the wise men, having found the house in which Joseph and Mary and Jesus were staying, presented their gifts. Now, bringing this into the current day, I want to share with you something that I learned quite recently from a wonderful pastor from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, whose name is Mark Hatcher. Known him for many years. He was here in Kenya with Brother Cirillo. What Pastor Hatcher told me was that in his church, he teaches his people not to give Christmas gifts. Because when people go out and spend all their money on Christmas gifts, they start the new year off broke. And we know that that's true in Kenya, that in December, crime rates go up because people are stealing in order to get Christmas gifts. Now, Pastor Hatcher teaches his people not to exchange gifts on Christmas. Instead, he says, go to the store the day after Christmas when everything is on sale and buy it for half price and then exchange the gifts on New Year's. Now, I thought that was very, very wise. So I don't know if there are any pastors who are listening to this, but since Jesus wasn't born on December the 25th anyway, we might as well take advantage of the sales. And then when January comes and it's time for school fees and all the other things, then we won't have all of these enormous holiday bills and be completely broke, as everybody in Kenya always is, in January. So I just pass on that word of wisdom from Pastor Mark Hatcher of the Holy Ghost headquarters in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Anyway, there's no reason to give all of our substance to the shopkeepers who aren't saved anyway, the Shah family and so on, running Nakumat. Let's hold it for ourselves, and let's buy when they're trying to sell hard and are willing to give us a good price. Returning, though, to the wise men, and being warned from God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they went back to their own country by another way. Now, when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared unto Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and stay there until I bring you word. For Herod is about to seek the young child to destroy him. So Joseph arose, and he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that there might be fulfilled what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, Out of Egypt have I called my son. Everywhere we look in this story of Jesus' birth, there's supernatural revelation surrounding it. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Rhema of God. And the great example of most of these characters is that as soon as they heard the Rhema of God, they didn't question it, they didn't doubt it, they didn't say, this can't be, they simply obeyed it. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Rhema of God. The just shall live by faith. I pray for each and every one of us as the life of Christ courses through our spirits and souls, that we may be enabled to walk a life of obedience to revelation, even as did Jesus and his family. For the just shall live by faith. I'm Dr. Mitch Medina, and this is the Life of Christ.